Hold on to your seats, because what you're about to see is classified information the government has tried to keep under wraps. Prepare to witness extraordinary footage, leaked from top-secret archives, revealing unidentified aerial phenomena that will shatter your perception of reality. These aren't your average blurry lights or weather balloons. They are undeniable proof of encounters that defy explanation.
Starting us off today, we have a mission documented to the public by none other than Bob Lazar. You might have heard of him before. The mission took place in the 1980s and involved the reverse engineering of an extraterrestrial spacecraft fueled by an element that was supposedly undiscovered at the time and wouldn't be openly discovered until 2003, when a team of Russian and American scientists were able to synthesize it. The element was element 115, also known as moscovium. It's super heavy and highly radioactive and apparently out of this world, much like the spaceship Lazar claims to have worked on while working as an engineer on the base. He said that the spaceship had been collected by the agency along with 8 others. It was taken apart piece by piece and then replicated by the Area 51 team. The engineering mission was a success, and the homemade alien spacecraft took its first flight right in front of Bob Lazar's eyes. He claimed that it was nothing like anything he had ever seen before. It did not need any form of acceleration prior to takeoff, but rather the vessel lifted directly into the air and had the ability to fly at unseen speeds. Next up, we have the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Mission. That's a mouthful. A secret mission that operated out of the base with the purpose of identifying airborne threats to American land and its people, whether the threats be out of this world or not. I guess it makes sense that this was a classified mission. I mean, who really wants either a threat or target to know that they've got eyes on them? Since the operation began, it's become declassified, but it remains highly unpublicized, most likely due to censoring, along with the fact that there's really not much we know about it other than the fact that that's the name of it, and that's pretty much it. Sources have come forward, however, insisting that the program, which operated for 5 years between 2007 and 2012, with a budget of $22 million, was created for something much larger than international threats, claiming that the majority of the budget was dedicated to identifying and capturing intergalactic ones instead. Which of course brings us to the Roswell cover-up and others like it, aka the ongoing mission of the base to keep Americans and the rest of the world in the dark about what's really going on in our skies, our atmosphere, and our galaxy. The Roswell incident follows an aircraft that crash landed in the field of a farmer in New Mexico. When Area 51 got news of the incident, they rushed to collect all the pieces and cover up all traces of the wreck. They claimed it was a weather balloon but never released any proof, and on top of that, what they collected from the farmer's property was sent to multiple other bases for a more in-depth analysis. If it was actually a weather balloon, I really don't see why that would be necessary. Of course, this isn't the only possible UFO cover-up known to date. Multiple sightings of UFOs have been reported and subsequently debunked, quote unquote, by officials at Area 51, but they rarely provide any information beyond a statement saying, "It's not what you think it is." Well, I don't think I believe them. Next up, we have hazardous waste disposal and the possible underground testing that took place in, on, around, or under Groom Lake, also known as Papoose Lake. That's a fun one to say, papoose. On January 30th of 1996, US President Bill Clinton signed a presidential declaration exempting the Air Force operations near the lake from having to comply with federal, state, interstate, or local hazardous or solid waste laws based on the grounds that it might require the disclosure of classified information. Wild! As you can imagine, this was terrible for locals in the area. I mean, the lake became illegal hazardous waste dumping ground. A lawsuit was filed alleging that the base had gone against the Conservation and Recovery Act in the area, but have no fear. In September of 2003, US President George W. Bush reiterated the fact that the military base was well within their rights to continue their lawless and potentially harmful waste disposal free of charge and without interference from the law. In the spring of 1997, 1 year after the allowance was originally granted, a man named Jerry Freeman Freeman somehow snuck his way onto the base and became the first civilian to see the lake after the hazardous disposals had begun. He described it as dried up and vibrating from the center with like a pulsing light, which led him to theorize that secret government experiments might possibly be taking place underneath or around the lake as well. Next up, we've got mission Totally Spies. Not really, but it was totally a mission that involved a spy plane, more specifically the Lockheed U-2 spy plane, a United States aircraft that in August of 1955 had the ability to fly up to 70,000 feet high at 500 miles per hour. That's super advanced for the time. The reason that the plane was engineered, built, and tested on the base was because Area 51 is massive, which allowed the process of inventing, testing, and deploying the plane to take place virtually undetected. Well, kinda. I mean, the Soviets didn't see it, so that was a win for sure. Some locals did, and when they first saw the plane, they actually believed it to be some kind of alien spacecraft, which may lend a reason as to why the base became so intermingled with extraterrestrial folklore. For a while, the government let this line of thinking slide, but eventually it revealed that what had been seen in the skies around Area 51 was in fact an advanced piece of espionage technology, or so they say. Okay, another great use for a massive secret base. Probably nuclear testing, right? Yeah, I think so. Do you think so? Because the fellows over at Area 51 definitely thought so. The base became a nuclear testing facility during the 1950s after the US, along with Canada and the United Kingdom, created the first nuclear weapon, aka the Manhattan Project. The base was used to test the severity and the risk level of the weapon, as well as its impact on environmental factors, along with environmental restoration techniques. A hazardous materials spill center was also built on the base, but I think we all know exactly how the majority of the hazardous waste was handled. Papoose. A crap ton of fission-type nuclear devices were detonated in the area, as well as dirty bombs, which are radioactive dispersal devices that combine radioactive material with conventional explosives. This led to a permanent change in the area's landscape, and to this day, the soils of the Nevada test site remain contaminated with radioactive materials. We are all aware that censorship is rampant in this day and age, but it's really nothing new, as highlighted by the publishing and quick removal of a photograph showcasing the base. The image was taken in 1998 by a Russian spy satellite. I'm not sure if they knew at the time that they had just struck American gold, but it seems as though in 2000 they came to realize exactly what they had achieved. The first ever photograph taken of Area 51, and from an aerial point of view no less, was released to the public. It was posted on a website called terraserver.com, which charged viewers around $7 to see the image. And it was actually totally legal, because in 1992 the Open Skies Treaty dictated that all 24 signatory nations, meaning all 24 nations who signed the treaty, had permission to photograph and publish each other's territories. What's strange though, is that shortly after the release of the photograph, the website was hacked and the photo disappeared. A website that was working just fine without any issues for years prior. After the image was released, the Pentagon did, however, finally acknowledge the fact that they did in fact have a large military base operating in Nevada, but provided no information regarding said operations. While the photo was removed back then, it's now back on the internet and available today. Speaking of the Pentagon, it seems as though in 2020 the public finally got their wish when the Pentagon finally declassified a number of videos and photographs that we were, all well aware that they had. I'm talking UFOs, baby. The Pentagon released the photos and videos on their official website, showcasing a variety of unidentified flying objects and aerial phenomena. Along with this, the FBI also declassified 16 documents outlining their thoughts and findings on the matter, although a lot of the information in the documents has been redacted. So the truth is out there. The government has admitted to having a secret base and to having been actively tracking UFO and UAP activities. But here is the thing. Are they feeding us this information because they really truly have decided to be transparent in their quest to uncover the secrets of the universe? Or are they feeding us to keep our mouths shut? So apparently before all the nukes and aliens and hazardous waste and spy planes and secrets, Area 51 was nothing more than a humble testing and training facility for the pilots of the U-2 aircraft. Apparently. Its official government name was, and actually still is, the Nevada Test and Training Range, a unit of Neal's Air Force Base. Doesn't really have the same ring to it though, if you ask me. Other nicknames for the base have been Paradise Ranch, The Ranch, Waterdown, and Dreamland, probably because they're dreaming if they think we don't know that they're holding on to aliens. Anyways, in November of 1959, about 4.5 years after the base was established, a radar testing facility became active. And as always with Area 51, while there is not much information out there as to what the radars are being used for, it has been speculated that their main purpose was to track the detectability of the U-2 aircrafts. Seems pretty obvious, but I feel like it's kind of weird that they didn't just come out and say that after the purpose of the U-2 spycraft was revealed. But I think I've given up on trying to figure out why they release the things they do and don't the things they don't. Anyways, finally on our list today we have the discovery of aliens and the subsequent experimentation on said aliens and their extraterrestrial modes of transportation. Now, in the beginning we already touched on the fact that the military personnel at Area 51 were allegedly able to reconstruct an alien spacecraft using reverse engineering. But just like how when there's smoke there's fire, when there's an alien spacecraft, there must be an alien. Many members of the public believe that not only have the government found and taken into custody the ships of aliens, but the actual aliens themselves. Whether or not they are thin green men with oval heads and bulging eyes is still up for debate. Maybe we should get a petition going in the comments and see if the government will finally comply with the Freedom of Information Act. Or maybe they already have and they don't actually have to tell us everything. Who knows? I'm a YouTuber, not a lawyer.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Holy Trinity. The Paracas candelabra is a mysterious geoglyph located in the Paracas Peninsula in Peru. It is a large figure carved into the side of a hill measuring over 180 meters in length, and it is visible from the sea. The geoglyph depicts a candelabra-like figure with a central stem and 3 branches extending outwards. Cactus-like, some would say. The exact age and purpose of the Paracas candelabra remains unknown, but it is believed to have been created by the Paracas culture who inhabited the region from 800 BCE to 100 BCE. In other words, it's very old. This geoglyph is now considered an important archaeological site and a cultural landmark of Peru, attracting tourists and researchers who are all of course intrigued by its history and symbolism. The stuff just blows my mind. In our number 9 spot today we have the Dark Ages tomb. Looking back to the Dark Ages in Shamir Heights, northern Israel, this tomb is quite large. Made up of 400 tons of boulders and stretching 65 feet wide, this burial chamber goes back 4,000 years. It could mean that humans were part of an organized society that long ago, especially considering the art that they found on the ceiling inside the dolmen. This is the first time art has been documented in one of these chambers in the Middle East, and we haven't quite figured out what the ceiling carvings depict yet. So far we think arrows or anchors. Inside the actual grave there were 3 sets of human remains, so it has been used for quite a while. While excavating the ancient grave site, archaeologists also found colored beads. One of the most intriguing parts of the grave has to be the lines carved in the ceiling. All those lines connecting to one arc. What does it mean? In our number 8 spot today we have the Nazca lines. We've all heard of alien crop circles at one point or another. I remember watching the movie Signs when I was younger. And then I couldn't sleep for 13 years. The birthday party scene is just too much for me. And that is exactly why this next one freaked me out. Just 200 miles southeast of Peru, we can find hundreds of markings etched into the earth. They're massive pieces of art, like crop circles, but more intimidating. The biggest ground graffiti spans over 1,200 feet. Many people believe this was an ancient ritual for water. Given its location, that theory checks out. Another theory written in 1968 in Eric von Daniken's book Chariots of the God suggests that ancient Nazca was a site for alien visitors, leaving behind knowledge in the form of these massive doodles and technology. One of them just says Garbazar was here. We're like, oh, Nice! And on number 7 spot today we have the Ice Age art. More ancient artwork, this time from the Colombian Amazon. Thing is, unlike other drawings found on the ceilings of tombs, this canvas stretches about 8 miles. The paintings are even more impressive, dating back to 12,000 years ago. These were made near the end of the last Ice Age. Thousands of paintings, by the way, not just a handful of arrows either. These were found in 2017, but it was only last year when they went public with the findings. The findings being paintings of elephants, massive sloths, horses from the Ice Age, snakes, birds, deer. This is now one of the largest collections of rock art in South America. Pregnant women or the origins of the Ninja Turtles? You tell me. In our number 6 spot today we have Tomb KV55. Located in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, Tomb 55, otherwise known as KV55, was discovered by Edward Ayrton back in 1907. And the reason we call this tomb by a number rather than a name is because we really don't know who or what is inside. Even the walls inside aren't like other tombs, covered in ancient hieroglyphs, tipping the reader off on the noble history of the king that lies before them. Nothing is here. The only hint that remains is one hieroglyph, and it translates to, "The evil one shall not live again." Even these massive stones were built in order to prevent anything from getting out. Usually with these ancient tombs, it's the opposite. The description for those inside the tomb has also been destroyed, so we have no idea who's in KV55 or what. Many believe it's Akhenaton, and back then they didn't believe in multiple gods, just one, so Akhenaton got on the wrong foot with the high priests, and over his 17 years of ruling, he was convincing everybody that their art and religion was wrong, and there was only one god in existence. This was the sun god. His own son, King Tut, succeeded him and luckily restored the previous religion, but maybe the sun god was passing knowledge to him, or maybe he just loved staring at the sun. Or maybe aliens. Honestly, we gotta tie it back in somehow. In our number 5 spot today we have the Voynich manuscript. In 1912, an antique bookseller somehow stumbled upon the Voynich manuscript. This is a book that is 250 pages long, and while it shows some images of different things, it is also completely written in an unknown alphabet. The book is said to be from around 600 years ago, but why have we never seen this alphabet at all before? Aliens? A researcher by the name of Stephen Bax has apparently been able to decipher 14 of the characters in the book, but do you really know for sure? It is said that while this book may have been written in some unknown language, it may also possibly be code for something that is yet to be cracked. While I truly have no idea what secrets this book holds, I do hope it's nothing of importance to us now. Or maybe the aliens are just trying to make contact. Write in English, please. In our number 4 spot today we have the Atacama Giant. This massive geoglyph is located in the Atacama Desert of Chile. Looks like an alien doodle. I love this little guy. It is a large human-like figure measuring 86 meters in height, and it is believed to have been created by the pre-Columbian peoples who inhabited the area over 1,000 years ago. The figure's arms are raised and its body is decorated with symbols and designs that are thought to have been religious or have astronomical significance. Imagine finding this one day hundreds of years ago. It would be absolutely jarring. The purpose of the geoglyph remains a mystery. Who were they trying to communicate with in the skies? The geoglyph is speculated to have been used for astronomical observation or as a spiritual symbol. Today, the Atacama Giant is considered an important archaeological site and a cultural landmark in the region. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Northern Kazakhstan geoglyphs. This is a package deal, more than one symbol in this one. Massive, mysterious geoglyphs were found in the remote regions of northern Kazakhstan. These geoglyphs consisted of various shapes and symbols, including circles, squares, lines, some of which stretch for several kilometers across the landscape. Our last one was one symbol, one little guy. This one here is much larger. The origin and purpose of these geoglyphs of course remain unknown, but they are believed to have been created by the ancient nomadic tribes who inhabited the region over 2,000 years ago. Some experts speculate that the geoglyphs may have been used for religious or ceremonial purposes, while others believe that they may have served as navigational aids. Or, if you're clicking this video, maybe they were communicating with higher beings. Maybe it was aliens, I'm just saying, alright? Today, the northern Kazakhstan geoglyphs are considered a very important archaeological site. In our number 2 spot today, we have the stone circles. The Middle Eastern stone circles are a collection of ancient structures consisting of standing stones. You guessed it, all forming circles. They're found in various parts of the Middle East. Again, an incredible amount of work was required to coordinate these geoglyphs. The stone circles are over 5,000 years old and were likely used for religious or astronomical purposes. Researchers have agreed that there must have been some sort of leader or head architect involved in order to make these circles happen. Maybe an alien architect. He's just laying out floor plans for this lovely new planet he found. Experts believe that they could have been used to herd wild animals, or the stone circles could have been used in ceremony after death. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Sajama lines. The Sajama lines were rediscovered in the 1930s in the Sajama National Park in Bolivia. It's a massive network of straight lines and geometric shapes stretching over 20 kilometers over the surrounding landscape. What creeps me out the most is that this looks like another planet. This looks like a crater with lines shooting out of it, almost like an ancient alien highway. Maybe I'm crazy, but we're here at number 1 after all. Some experts believe that the Sajama lines were used for astronomical observation as they are aligned with the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. That's both impressive, but also terrifying, okay?
Such as number 10's Ryan Graves. For those of us who keep our heads deep under a rock as possible, such as myself, Ryan Graves has been breaking the internet recently with his very vocal claims of UFOs, going as far to say that he saw them every day in his time as a Navy pilot. Now, the dude is no foil hat freak. He comes packing your usual high qualifications and certifications needed for this role. So Graves is a former Navy pilot and engineer, chairs of America Institute Aeronautics and Astronautics UAP Integration and Outreach Committee, and now the founder of the new nonprofit Americans for Safe Aerospace, which is like Mothers Against Drunk Driving for our atmosphere. Graves chose to testify in front of Congress last month about how he feels these UAP, which is the boring version of a UFO, are actually a threat to our security and safety. So in April of 2014, his FA-18 squadron was on a training mission, and he said after achieving 12,000 feet in what's an exclusive naval airspace, i.e. nobody can fly here zone, 2 jets crossed the threshold to find, and I quote, a dark gray cube inside of a clear sphere, motionless against the wind, fixed directly at the entry point. He goes on to say that the jets, only 100 feet apart, zipped past the object on either side. The pilots had come so dangerously close to something they couldn't identify that they terminated the training mission immediately and returned to base. Ryan Graves said that the flight leader, in extreme duress, told him, I almost hit one of those damn things, man, in the pilot's ready room, and that we all knew exactly what he meant by those damn things, as they'd been plaguing us for the last 8 months. Having had this harrowing and potentially deathly experience, should things have been slightly different, Graves felt the need to develop a reporting service for pilots who come across these unidentified flying objects, shedding light on a huge amount of investment that goes into the training of commercial pilots. Graves questioned the government for turning its back on the UAP reports, even though they all come from credible eyewitnesses. Number 9, which is the 2022 H0219. So, unlike America, Canada actually does have a UFO entry database for pilots. It's called KDORS, and it'll document anything from unruly passengers on flights to birds getting sucked into engines to aliens, apparently. As long as it's causing a problem and it's in the air, KDORS wants to know about it. Now, Transport Canada, despite having a reporting service for such things as UFOs, still cautions that reports contain preliminary, unconfirmed data that can be subject to change. And 2022 H0219 is the KDORS case number assigned to an incident that took place on September 17th of 2022, when an Air Canada flight from Toronto, quote, reported passing an unidentified object approximately 10 feet above the captain's window while making a left-hand bank at 1,300 feet just an hour before sunset. The report continues to mention that the flight crew couldn't identify the object, which is confusing seeing as it's 10 feet from the captain's window, and they went on to land without further incident. Now, the report wraps itself up with that, and trust me, if you visit the KDORS log, it's vague at best. But now you have a bit more context as to why they have that subject to change warning on their website. I'm not saying they would casually omit details, but you really think something was 10 feet away from the pilot and the airline's attendants' faces and they couldn't ID it? On to number 8, which is 2022 02794. Another KDORS flight sighting. So there is quite literally no shortage of them. According to CTV, from unidentified objects to strange lights, Canadian aviation officials receive at least 16 unusual reports in 2022, including 11 from pilots flying for Air Canada, WestJet, Virgin Atlantic, United, and more. This report was made by Nav Canada on November 12th of 2022. It was a cargo freighter flying from Chicago to Frankfurt, Germany overnight. The route taken brings the pilots right overhead northeastern Ontario, where good things grow. The Cater's document, which was entered a few days after the incident, states that the pilots reported seeing lights that were moving eastward at the same speed as the aircraft while flying in the dark. Now, there's no further information on this one, but I sure wish there was. Number 7 is a break from Cater reports. It's going to be the racetrack. So veteran pilot Chris Van Voris told the Daily Mail of a strange encounter he had had in which 3 to 5 bright objects flew in a circular motion like a racetrack for hours on end over top of the Pacific Ocean in August of 2022. Their racetrack seemed to stretch from Honolulu to Los Angeles and then back. Similar to Graves, the 63-year-old Voris ain't some random dude in a tinfoil hat. He's racked up over 32,000 hours of flight experience working with multiple airlines, and when he witnessed this awe-inspiring yet decidedly creepy phenomena, Voris said that he was hit with an onslaught of other airline pilots radioing in to ask if he was seeing the objects as well. Apparently, as he told Daily Mail, about half of his pilot friends have seen some type of anomaly in the sky. They had to be in a very, very high orbit, or actually even in space quite a ways away from anything that a satellite would be, because every time we were seeing it, it was in the lower right-hand corner of the Big Dipper, no matter where we were in the world, he told the outlet. It lasted for such a long time that it actually became boring. Almost. Van Voris's employer, whose name is withheld, forbade him from speaking about the incident. However, that hasn't kept him from running his mouth, claiming to have also seen 3 flying discs in a triangular formation back in 2004. Number 6 will be the letter response. After tackling the dragon that is paywalls, I was able to scrape together the details of a letter written by Art Sabosky, entitled A Pilot Explains UFOs for the Last Time. Now, to save you guys some time and the paywalls, Art's letter is essentially him complaining that he spent 45 years as a pilot and hasn't seen boo, and all his pilot friends haven't seen anything either, therefore no pilot could have ever seen anything ever, and if they have, they're either Mary Jane smoking or visually impaired. Essentially, you could title his letter, I am mad other professional aviators have seen something and I haven't. Now, the whole argument of if I haven't seen a thing, therefore it does not exist is pretty much the argument of UFO non-believers. This is why Ralph Lowinger was quick to fire back a response. So UFOs don't exist because you and your friends haven't seen one? I know they exist because I was a co-pilot of a Pan-American cargo flight with 5 crew members who clearly saw their formation. It was on a crystal clear moonless night over Nova Scotia's south coast, and we all watched and saw the same thing through different panes of cockpit glass. Their dance was from another world. It lasted 5 minutes and terminated with the most dazzling feat of aerodynamics we have ever seen. I have now retired to the largest fly-in community in the world, in which many highly trained observers know that UFOs are real. Cataracts and floaters aside. Lowinger and other crew members never reported their sightings, but their story did come to light in 2011. Number 5 will be the Skydiver. So this story comes out of the Virginia pilot Julius Figueroa in July of 2022. Julius had served in the Navy as a pilot for 2 years before getting a job in the Midwest as a skydive pilot. What would be considered an everyday venture, loaded up with his usual adrenaline junkies trying to touch the clouds, Julius and his passengers experienced a different kind of adrenaline-invoking experience. We were climbing 10,000 feet, and at around 4,300 feet, I was looking into the distance and this thing caught my eye, Figueroa said. It started getting closer and it was approaching me about 15 feet to my left heading north. Figueroa goes on to say that the object was spherical golden orb that was flying very fast, but interestingly, he reported that you couldn't see the object when you looked at it directly. Other pilots have reported the same thing during their encounters, and it does sound like an explanation for what happened even in our first story, where Graves' team didn't notice the flying anomaly until they were about to crash into it. Julius said that the object was the size of a small car, and without realizing it, he started turning his plane to the left. As the object passed by, Figueroa said he started yelling, causing the other people in the back of the plane to look out the window. 3 of the skydivers see it, including one of the instructors, Figueroa says. By the time I turned the plane, it was already on the horizon, and shortly after, the object was gone. Figueroa contacted air traffic control and asked them if they'd seen a drone on radar, to which they said they didn't. He called again and described the object he saw and asked if they had seen seen it. To quote him, there was a long pause on the other end, and then they said they didn't see it. Number 4 will be the Passover, and not the one with the matzah and the karpas. I'm still full from the last one. I'm talking about the weird and very underdocumented occurrence from June of 2023 in which a pilot in Toronto reported, and I quote, seeing a person in a wingsuit flying at an altitude of 13,000 feet. Now, articles did mention that this incident was filed with Transport Canada. However, even after spending hours searching KDORs, I was unable to find a report or provide a case number. But to give you an idea why this reporting is so weird, aside from everything about it, A, who uses a wingsuit nowadays? And B, this altitude actually breaches the death zone. For those of us who don't climb Mount Everest in our free time, the death zone is to refer to the point at which an altitude's lack of oxygen becomes insufficient to sustain human life. The average person tends to die around altitudes of 8,000 feet and higher, and it's all attributed to the physical capabilities of cellular oxygenation. So what does that mean? Aliens. Number 3 is gonna be our last CADORD report of the list. It is 2022-1004. Where? Kitchener-Waterloo area. For my viewers outside of Canada, it's a few hours drive from Toronto, Ontario, and it's a lovely little college town chock full of frat boys, geese, and hockey. And now, apparently, their new claim to fame is that there's some aliens all up overhead. During the daylight hours of May 28, 2022, local police were notified after multiple reports were received by local traffic of an unidentified object, possibly a balloon or a radio-controlled plane, at 3,000 feet and 7 nm south of Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. It's incredibly frustrating trying to pursue more knowledge or information on this sighting, as unfortunately its documentation is limited to what I just told you. You'd think there have been so many witnesses and reports between pilot and citizens alike, perhaps there'd be more statements. What I did learn, however, is since Ontario kept popping up for these sightings and I was curious, is that according to 2022 numbers, Quebec led all provinces with about 29% of all Canadian UFO reports, narrowly edging out Ontario, who has 28% out of the total recorded 786 sightings in our country. Number 2 is the Tic Tac. Remember Ryan Graves and how he testified to Congress? Well, he's not the only one who did. During a hearing before the House lawmakers, retired Navy fighter pilot and Commander David Fravor testified about his experience seeing what he described as a Tic Tac looking object while on a flight back in 2004. Commanding the FA-18F squadron on the USS Nimitz, he and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich were on a flight off the coast of Southern California on November 14th of 2004 when they saw a flying object. The advanced radar on the ship was part of their training group and detected what operators called multiple anomalous aerial vehicles over the horizon, descending 80,000 feet in less than a second. Fravor and Dietrich swerved over that way to investigate, each carrying an extra witness, the weapons system officer, in the backs of their jets. Fravor recalls the experience. I said, dude, do you see that thing down there? And we saw this little white Tic Tac looking object, and it was just kind of moving above the whitewater area. Fravor went in for a closer look. He described the Tic Tac object mirroring his movement, saying it was aware we were there and that all 4 of us in the airplanes literally were watching this thing for roughly about 5 minutes. The object was about the size of Fravor's FA-18F, with no markings, no wings, and no visible exhaust plumes. When Fravor tried to cut off the strange flying anomaly, it accelerated so quickly it seemed to disappear. He said it was detected roughly 60 miles away less than a minute later. I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and capabilities that we had at that time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years. And coming in at number 1 will be the 7. So this ex-FBI agent named Ben Hansen is now the host of the Discovery Plus TV series UFO Witness. He works hard to try and bring attention to UFOs, and in doing so collects worldwide reports and videos he can share that are as credible as possible. He compiled accounts from pilots from Southwest Airlines, Hawaiian Airlines, and others between August 6th and September 23rd of 2022. And in the captivating account we'll be discussing from this time period, a former military pilot reported seeing multiple aircrafts flying above him. Pilot Mark Hulsley was flying a charter jet on August 18th of 2022 off the coast of Los Angeles when he suddenly radioed in the following. We've got a few aircrafts to our north here, and he's going around in circles, much higher altitude than us. Any idea what they are? The confused controller responds, telling the pilot he's not sure. Hulsey then calls back 23 minutes later to say that the 3 aircrafts he had originally reported had now increased to 7, flying between 5,000 and 10,000 feet above him in a regimented pattern. While the controller continues to dismiss him, on, we hear the anxiety spike in Halsey, who's absolutely adamant, stating in the recorded footage to the controller that they just keep going in circles. I was an F-18 pilot in the Marine Corps, and I'm telling you, I've done many intercepts, I've never seen anything like this. According to Hansen, the strange lights that some pilots reported as possible aircraft were seen by upwards of 15 different commercial flights, and that at least 6 pilots are willing to go on record with their names and everything if asked to do so by any investigative agencies. According to Hansen, it means in this case we have a global phenomena as far west as Japan to as far east as possibly Miami. Whatever it is, these pilots are seeing it from halfway across the world. Hansen said there's no official protocol for reporting strange sightings for civilian pilots because they don't think the FAA will follow up, or worse, they will be ridiculed. But as we know, Ryan Graves is working to change that.
Number 10. Contractor. A former NASA contractor went on video to reveal the fact that NASA has been keeping secrets from us. She says she both viewed and heard evidence that 3 NASA astronauts said that they had seen unidentified flying objects land on the moon, but that these events were later covered up in an operation that was codenamed Santa Claus, a fitting name as NASA wants you to believe that UFOs are just about as real as Santa. She says that she had clearance to enter Building 8 at NASA's Johnson Space Center back in the 1970s. She says that she received information over lunch from officials that if anyone was ever caught exposing aliens as real, they would lose their pensions, and apparently one person in the past had not only lost their pension, but had disappeared off the face of the earth. In the video, she said, "They didn't threaten to kill me, but I got the message I shouldn't talk about it." She apparently witnessed everything from employees being forced to burn photographic evidence and seeing official pictures being airbrushed to hide UFOs. Number 9. The Kecksburg File. On the night of December 9th, 1965, a giant fireball which caused a sonic boom streaked across the sky before crashing into the woods in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Military immediately arrived and sealed off the area, hauling off a massive object the size of a bus to their Air Force base nearby in Ohio. The Pentagon immediately tried to cover it up, saying it was a meteorite, releasing no details about the incident. But in 2003, NASA went on to say that it was not a satellite, but 2 years later in 2005 they said, yeah, actually it was a satellite, just don't worry about it. The cover-up seemed never ending, and it just led more and more people to become interested in finding out the truth of the Kecksburg file. A Freedom of Information Act was then started to get the file looked into again, and the judge threw away NASA's attempts to have the lawsuit thrown out. So in 2007 they announced they would be reopening the Kecksburg file, but they claimed that a majority of the files had been destroyed or lost, and they never released what it actually was that crashed that day. Number 8. Astronaut. Like I said in the first point, there is allegedly a conspiracy within NASA to cover up any of their employees or former employees talking about the fact that they have had alien experiences. But as I have mentioned in other parts of this list, there are actually a handful of astronauts who have spoken out about potentially alien encounters. Leland Melvin is probably best known for taking his astronaut photos with his rescued dogs, but what you're probably not familiar with is the fact that he has shared his alien experiences on Twitter. He received a question on Twitter that read, "What's your outlook about the existence of intelligent alien life living in our solar system? Have you ever witnessed a UFO?" And Leland went on to respond with, "I have not seen one in space or on the ground, but thought I saw something organic/alien-like floating out of the payload bay. Randy Bresnick and I called the ground to ask what it could be, and they said it was ice that had broken off of the Freon hoses. Translucent, curved, organic looking, with an alien emoji at the end. Of course, he explains it by saying it was just ice, but that was probably just NASA feeding them an easy cover-up. Number 7. Moon crash. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is similar to the Mars Orbiter that I have talked about before. It basically watches over the moon and takes pictures of its surface. Earlier this year, they released a photo that had many people scratching their heads and insisting that NASA was doing yet another cover-up. The photo shows the surface of the moon with what is called a double impact crater. While the moon is covered in tons of craters, this one is unique for this reason. The evidence of the dozens of feet wide indentation seems to show that some sort of man-made spaceship crashed into the moon and left the divot. Many people on social media believe this to be evidence that some sort of alien craft had hit the moon, but NASA tried to shut everyone
up by claiming it was just an out-of-control rocket. While they seem to know it was a rocket, they admitted that they don't have any idea where it came from or what its original path was intended to be. So even if it's not aliens, it's still pretty confusing. Number 6. Alien photo. Mars is one of the main planets that many people believe could be host to aliens, hence the term Martians and all the fictitious media that includes alien creatures visiting from Mars. On February 4th of this year, one person online dug up a photo that the Perseverance rover had taken on Mars back in 2021. The title of the blog post being "Alien Figure Watching Mars Rover, 100% Proof of Life UFO Sighting News." The image seems to show a dark figure laying on a large Martian rock. It's distinctly human-shaped and darkly colored and stands out from anything else in the area or what we've seen in previous pictures. The man explains in his blog post everything that he believes it to be. There is a person laying down watching the NASA Mars rover from a safe distance away. The person is about 1 foot tall, 0.3 meters, and is lying down. Pinkish upper chest, neck and face, reddish hair, wearing a dark suit, but has a gray object over one shoulder. Looks like a backpack of some sort. There are even footprints behind the person leading up to the location they chose to lay down at. If you don't agree with that, then what do you think it could be? Number 5. Mercury UFO. Project Mercury was NASA's first ambitious space mission, which took place back in the early 1960s, which included 6 manned space flights. But that isn't what we're going to be focusing on. One of the Mercury probes sent out into space took a picture of what appears to clearly be a UFO. A photo that a NASA blogger found in an old disk from the mission that took place in December 1960 appears to show a strange shape that looks like it could be an alien spacecraft. While many arguments against UFOs are that they're just random space junk, this was at the beginning of NASA's steps out into space, so there really couldn't have been that many rocket pieces and broken panels floating around. The blogger says that he believes this is aliens wanting to watch one of humanity's biggest steps, not worrying about being seen because this particular craft didn't actually have any humans on it. Number 4. Deleted UFO. This same blogger also recently found evidence of NASA purposefully covering up and deleting archival photos that appear to show evidence of aliens. He found a photo of what appears to be a large, dark, rectangular alien ship flying past the sun, and he also found that NASA is trying to hide it. On his blog, he said, "I found a huge rectangle UFO shooting past our sun, and it's got to be several miles across or more. I tried to find it on another NASA site, but I got an error message. Then I tried using official European Space Administration software, and again, error message. Then I went into the individual photos online and input my own URL, but these photo times do not exist. That's 3 different sources all erased from existence. I found it at a 4th source." He says that he won't reveal this other source as he doesn't want it taken down as well. There are 20 different photos in a row that all show the unidentified craft, and he calls NASA out for never saying anything about it. Number 3. Mars photos. I talked about this on a separate list, but I also wanted to touch on it here too. We've taken a look at one Mars rover photo already, but I want to dive into just how many of these there are. People are constantly picking out unexplained and potentially alien things popping up in these photos of the red planet. One of the most baffling recent images is this one that appears to show some sort of carved out entryway which people believe must lead to some sort of alien hideout on the planet, looking too precise to have been caused by natural weather and environment conditions like NASA claims. There have also been many rocks that appear to be much more than just rocks, as they stand out from anything else in the photos, almost looking like a sort of coral growing out from the ground through the dust. There are a lot of them, and NASA has attempted to explain away all these photos, but there is still just a lot of mystery there. Number 2. The Calvine photo. This one is similar to the Kecksburg file in the way that it is also a UFO encounter from many decades ago that NASA tried to hide away by claiming it was lost. The photo was taken in August 1990 by 2 hikers near Calvine in Scotland. It shows what is clearly a large diamond-shaped vessel flying through the sky, being trailed by another airplane. They took pictures and said it appeared to be about 30 meters long. It apparently then shot straight up into the sky and disappeared, never to be seen again. The photo was first given to the newspaper and then handed over to the Ministry of Defense, and then it was never discussed again, and the photo apparently went missing. In October of 2021, the Scottish Operations Records book was checked, and there was no account of anything having been spotted in the sky on that day. One determined individual, however, managed to track down the lost photo, and about it they said, "The Calvine photograph stands as one of the biggest mysteries in UFO history. Finally revealed after 32 years, it shows that answers only bring new questions." Number 1. Space nudes. In May of this year, it was revealed to the public that NASA was going to be sending a message out to aliens, calling it the Beacon in the Galaxy. It's a binary coded message that includes details about our planet and human life that is going to be shot into space for anybody to find. One of these images was revealed to be an image of what a genetically male and female human look like, and yes, it has all the details. It also includes a diagram of gravity so aliens know which part of us is the top and which is the bottom. Other images included are the solar system diagram, a map of Earth's landmass, and depictions of things like mountains and trees. So yes, NASA is actually sending our nudes out to space. The fact that they are doing this shows that at least a small part of the organization believes that aliens are out there to receive this message.
Starting off this countdown, we have the alien abduction. Back in 1956, an American Air Force Sergeant, Jonathan P. Lovett, and Major William Cunningham went out searching for debris from a recent missile launch in New Mexico. That's when Cunningham heard Lovett let out a huge scream. When he rushed over to help him, he claims he saw Lovett being pulled up by a UFO hovering above him. Lovett was then pulled inside the craft and it took off. Cunningham radioed for help, and when they arrived, they found him in complete shock and he was taken to the hospital. They then started to investigate the incident. According to the military, there was an unidentified object in that area detected on their radar, so Cunningham was telling the truth. Here's where it gets even more messed up though. 3 days later, Lovett's body was found 10 miles away. It was severely mutilated and drained completely of blood. So could it be that he literally was taken away by aliens and then killed by them? What makes this even more suspicious is that the government report on this just vanished into thin air. In our 9th spot, we have the Gorman dogfight UFO. This is said to be one of the most well-known UFO encounters from the 20th century. It's also a fairly credible one. So on October 1st, 1948, US Air Force pilot George Gorman was out flying when he spotted a UFO below him. He described it as a flying disc with round and well-defined edges that was brightly lit and circling slowly over the city. What was weird was that the object was not showing up on radar. So Gorman decided to follow it, but as he got closer to the object, it got brighter and then it shot away from him. He said it went around 250 miles per hour, then increased to 600 miles an hour. Due to its speed, Gorman lost sight of it. Now the government was all like, it's just a weather balloon. Yeah right, I think an experienced aviator would know the difference between a weather balloon and a flying saucer. In our 8th spot, we have the Pentagon. Last year, the Pentagon released footage of what they confirmed to be a UFO. I'm pretty sure by now you have all seen this video, but if you haven't, I'll share it with you today. So the UFO was captured on camera by 2 naval aviators who were shocked at what they saw.
There's a whole fleet of them, look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
So in the videos you can see what appears to be a UFO flying in the sky. In the video you can hear just how shocked the pilots are at what they're seeing.
Look at that thing, dude.
In fact, one of the pilots that witnessed this told CNN that the disc moved in ways he couldn't explain. Apparently, 1 second it was there and then next thing you know it disappeared. He said, and I quote, "As I got close to it, it rapidly accelerated to the south and then disappeared in less than 2 seconds. This was extremely abrupt, like a ping pong ball bouncing off a wall. It would hit and go the other way." Moving on to number 7, we have the Top Cliff UFO. On September 19th in 1952, half a dozen Royal Air Force officers were taking part of NATO exercises when they encountered a UFO. So the men were headed back in their fighter jet when crew members on the ground saw a weird, silvery, circular object traveling several thousands of feet above the jet. One of the witnesses said, and I quote, "The acceleration was in excess of that of a shooting star. I have never seen such a phenomenon before. The movements of the object were not identifiable with anything I have seen in the air." The craft then started to descend close to the fighter jet. They said it was, and I quote, "swinging in a pendular motion, similar to a falling sycamore leaf." At first, they thought it was a parachute or something that had fallen off of the jet. That was until it stopped midair, began to spin, and then just zoomed away. This sighting was then leaked to the press and was the front cover of the newspapers for quite some time. In fact, this sighting was so insane that Prime Minister Winston Churchill wanted to know more about it and get an investigation going. In our 6th spot, we have the destroyed evidence. On the morning of July 24th, 1948, 2 pilots were flying from Houston to Atlanta with their 20 passengers. That's when all of a sudden they saw a UFO flying clear as day by them. This was witnessed by the 2 pilots and one of the passengers. The others were asleep when this happened. One of the pilots said, and I quote, "It was clear there were no wings present, that it was powered by some jet or other type of power, shooting flame from the rear some 50 feet. There were 2 rows of windows which indicated an upper and lower deck, and from inside these windows a very bright light was glowing. Underneath the ship there was a blue glow of light." Now they all watched this for about 10 seconds until it disappeared. Obviously, they reported their findings, and this triggered a top secret investigation by the US government. In the end, their findings were destroyed, which means this could be a real UFO sighting, because if it wasn't, they wouldn't have destroyed the evidence. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the White House UFO. Back in the 1940s and 50s, there were a number of UFO sightings in the skies over Washington, D.C. It all started back in 1947 when a search and rescue pilot reported 9 saucer-like discs flying together at over 1,000 miles per hour. Within weeks, the same flying saucer sighting was reported in 40 other states. The strangest incident happened to an air traffic controller in 1952. On July 19th, Edward Nugent, working as an air traffic controller at Washington National Airport, spotted 7 slow-moving objects on his radar. They were located far from any of their flight paths. Now he made a joke being like, "Oh look, they're flying saucers," until he realized that that's probably what they actually were. At that same time, 2 more air traffic controllers saw a strange hovering bright light in the distance. Now they did send out jets to the area, but as soon as they got to the area where the objects were on the radar, they disappeared. Over the next couple of weeks, more and more UFOs were spotted. It got to the point where people were demanding answers. In our 4th spot, we have Britain's Roswell. This is said to be the UK's most famous UFO incident. So in December of 1980 in Rendlesham Forest, England, a number of people reported seeing unexplained lights and then a weird spacecraft land. It all started on December 26 when a security man saw strange lights descend into the forest. As he approached this object, it moved through the trees and the animals at a farm nearby went crazy. The following days, more and more people saw these lights. In fact, a number of credible US Air Force officials were witnesses to this account, including Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt. The lieutenant himself confirmed it to be a UFO. In our 3rd spot, we have the 6 soldiers. This next UFO encounter took place in North Korea in 1951 during the Korean War. As the men were preparing to bombard a nearby village, they were all of a sudden greeted by a strange craft. The craft emitted some form of ray that made their air burst start to explode. According to one of the men, and I quote, "Objects would get right into the center of an airburst of artillery and yet remain unharmed." They also said that they were, and I quote, "swept by some form of a ray that was emitted in pulses, in waves that you could visually see only when it was aiming directly at you. That is to say, like a searchlight sweeps around and the segments of light, you would see it coming at you." After this weird attack, the men were left sick and had to be taken to the hospital. Some say that they were attacked by a UFO UFO. Others say they were attacked by a high-tech Soviet death ray. To this day, we still don't know. Moving on to number 2, we have the Mantel UFO incident. Named after Captain Thomas F. Mantel, a Kentucky Air National Guard pilot who sadly lost his life chasing a UFO. So on January 7, 1948, Godman Army Airfield at Fort Knox received a report of a weird aerial object near Madisonville, Kentucky. They claim it was a floating circular object around 250 to 300 feet in diameter. So the US Air Force sent Thomas to investigate. Sadly, while doing so, he crashed his plane and lost his life. Now, Thomas was a very experienced pilot. He had spent around 2,167 hours in the air, so it's not like him to just crash like that. Other people that saw the UFO claimed it was very white with red borders at the bottom. Some even said, and I quote, just before leaving it came to very near the ground, staying down for about 10 seconds, then climbed at a very fast rate back to its original altitude, 10,000 feet, leveling off and disappearing into the overcast, heading 120 degrees. Its speed was greater than 100 miles per hour in level flight. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Roswell UFO. This is said to be the most famous UFO case in America. So it takes place during the summer of 1947. A rancher named W.W. MacBrazel said he found wreckage on his big plot of land. In fact, during that time, there was a number of UFO sightings, so the rancher thought that the wreckage was from a UFO crash. So he brought that material to the sheriff, who brought it to an officer from the US Army Air Force. Later, the US Army announced that what the rancher found was a flying disc. But the following day, the US Army quickly reversed themselves, and they were like, no, it's not a UFO, it's actually just debris from a weather balloon. Years later, in 1994, they admitted that the weather balloon story had been completely bogus. Over the years, hundreds of UFO sightings have been reported in that area. Several eyewitnesses also claimed that they saw alien bodies being taken from a government test site. But the government was like, nah, those are just test dummies. Yeah, we'll go with that. I don't know.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Operation Midnight Climax. This experiment took place in the 1950s, and it was one of those mind control research projects that was sponsored by the CIA. This was actually just one experiment that was a part of Project MKUltra. So basically, they wanted to study the effects of LSD, but instead of finding willing participants, which, let's be honest, probably wouldn't have been that difficult, instead they used non-consenting people who were lured to safe houses by sex workers who were being paid by the CIA, and then once at these safe houses, they were slipped the drug and monitored from behind a one-way glass. For over a decade, the project gave the government more knowledge about the drug itself and what it does to the mind. It gave the knowledge about surveillance technology and even sexual blackmail. In the end, the project was shut down in 1965, but people don't forget, and the damage was already done. In our number 9 spot today, we have Operation Washtub. This operation came to light in 2014 when documents became declassified and more people could learn about this Cold War era operation. Basically, this was a covert mission that had its sights set on Alaska. The plan detailed the training of different people who lived in Alaska. Like, we're talking just ordinary residents. They wanted to train these people to both code and decode, and a few other different spying tactics, which would have been so cool. I mean, I would have wanted to be picked so badly. Not that I would have even known it was happening, but you get what I mean. Basically, the plan was put in place in case the Soviet Union was to invade Alaska. Then these unsuspecting ordinary citizens would use their newly learned espionage techniques to get all the intel they could and secretly relay that information to high-ranking US officials. As we now know, of course, this invasion never occurred, so the contingency plan wasn't needed, but there were 89 lucky temporary agents who were trained just for this purpose, and I have never been more jealous in my entire life. In our number 8 spot today, we have Project Minaret. This is a document that became declassified in 2013 as a part of the National Security Archive's efforts. This historical document describes a sort of watch list of prominent Americans who were critical of the Vietnam War. The document explains that their overseas communications were tapped and listened into by the government from 1967 to 1973, and a quote from the document reads, quote, "President Johnson wanted to know if the domestic anti-war movement was receiving help from abroad." The project expanded so much that it went on to include more than 1,600 1,500 people, including civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Whitney Young, and Muhammad Ali. There were also people like Democratic U.S. Senator Frank Church of Idaho, Republican Senator Howard Baker of Tennessee, a New York Times columnist, and a Washington Post columnist. The surveillance began under President Johnson, but it continued on through to the Nixon administration. In the end, the only reason it was stopped was because Attorney General Elliot Richardson was concerned about its very doubtful and murky legality and decided that during the Watergate scandal that it probably would just be best to shut it down. I mean, they definitely had enough on their plate already at the time. In our number 7 spot today we have Project Iceworm. This secret mission took place in the 1960s and it was basically intended to build a series of mobile nuclear missile launch sites under the Greenland ice sheet, because this would then house medium-range missiles close enough that they would be able to strike targets within the Soviet Union. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Century. Basically, Camp Century was to test out Project Iceworm and see how likely it would be and how feasible it would be. So engineers went to work and created a network of underground tunnels and buildings that included places to stay, kitchen, a hall for hanging out, there were supply rooms, and even a communication center and a nuclear power plant. This was all kept as a super secret for a long time and was even kept from the Danish government for 7 years. In 1966, however, the project was cancelled because of the shifting ice. This created unstable conditions for the underground tunnels that are most likely crushed now, but still remain beneath the Arctic. In our number 6 spot today we have the Pentagon crash. We have all heard about the devastating September 11th, 2001 attacks, but some of you might not know that on the day there were actually 4 separate coordinated attacks, all a part of the same plan, and one of those attacks was on the Pentagon. There was a photo that was previously classified but eventually has been released by the US government, and it shows the absolute devastation that was done by the commercial plane that crashed into the Pentagon. The plane was able to tear through all 5 rings that existed in the building. All of the people on board the plane that day, as well as 125 people that were in the building at the time, passed away in this horrible event. For obvious reasons, the initial photos of the Pentagon damage were withheld from the public or from circulating in the media, but now that they have been released, it just shows us all another side to that horrible, terrifying day. In our number 5 spot today we have the UFO report. This photo is of a previously classified document from 1963. Although the document still has a lot of information that has been blacked out, the document is the description and report of an unidentified flying object or UFO encounter. This is said to have taken place over the desert of Nevada, and the report was written in detail in order to have a written record of the event. This document is said to be the authentic report from the FBI, which is exactly why some of the details have still been omitted, despite it being declassified. This might seem like less of a big deal now, as in this day and age we have declassified video footage of similar kinds of encounters, but for 1963 this was huge. As discussions of alien or extraterrestrial life is a big part of our modern society, this document shows that these things have been on our minds for many years now. In our number 4 spot today we have Project 1794. This project was created with the goal to build a sort of saucer-type aircraft that would be designed to shoot down Soviet bombers. The program, which was created in the 1950s, was quite ambitious and had some pretty lofty goals. A team of engineers began trying to build a disc-shaped aircraft, but here's the real kicker. They wanted it to be capable of traveling at supersonic speeds at high altitudes. The documents about this project show that they wanted it to be able to travel at Mach 4, which is 4 times the speed of sound, and they wanted it to be able to reach an altitude of over 100,000 feet. At the time, the project was estimated to cost about $3 million, which is about $26 million today. In the end, the project was cancelled in 1961 because the craft failed tests and proved to be aerodynamically unstable, which of course would provide a whole slew of problems at high speeds, especially supersonic ones. In our number 3 spot today we have the Manned Orbiting Laboratory. So for this one, this is a mission that was created in response to a Soviet Union secret mission called Almaz. Basically, this program, called the Manned Orbiting Laboratory, was run by the Air Force and the intelligence community's National Reconnaissance Office, and the goal of it was to spy on and throw the Soviet Union off track in space. Some of the documents in this mission have now been declassified, and according to them, one of the goals was to knock some of Moscow's satellites out of orbit or to fire projectiles at them. They even wanted to try and capture one of the Soviet satellites in space and then basically send it back down to Earth so that they could study it. That's so wild. And because of this, Moscow equipped their secret space station with a rapid-fire cannon in order to stop any of this from happening. I seriously feel like I'm watching some sort of space action movie right now. I can't believe that these are real things that happened and they were created in the 60s and 70s. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Lunar kidnapping. Don't worry, Lunar is not a person and instead is a Soviet lunar satellite that was kidnapped just for one night. This project honestly sounds like it was taken straight from a movie, and it has to do with the Great Space Race. In the early 1960s, the Soviet Union wanted to make it as clear as possible that they were winning the race to space, so they launched a multinational exhibition of their Lunar satellites, which became the first spacecraft to impact the moon's surface. And when the Luna 3 returned, it brought with it the first ever pictures of the moon's far side. It was a big deal, and it's safe to say that the US wanted to know everything that they could about it. Of course, the satellite was heavily guarded, but it was traveling from city to city for this exhibition, so undercover CIA agents went to work. Basically, they convinced the man who drove the transport truck to get some rest at a nearby hotel, and basically they would look after it for him while he rested. I'm sure it was a bit more complicated than this, but you get the gist. From here, the agents then took apart and photographed every single component of the thing before putting it back together and placing it back in the truck for its next tour date. There is no indication that before the operation became declassified that anyone outside of those involved knew what had happened that day. And I'm not gonna lie, this is a pretty hilarious plan, and the fact that it worked is both shocking and pretty impressive. In our number 1 spot today, we have Operation Paperclip. This operation began in 1946 when the President of the United States at the time, Harry Truman, authorized it. Basically, the entire point of it was to lure scientists from Nazi Germany over to the United States after the Second World War. This was done in an effort to aid the country in their post-war efforts, as well as to ensure that the valuable knowledge these people had would not end up in the hands of perhaps the Soviet Union or either side of the divided East and West Germany. Had it not been classified information at the time, this would have of course been highly controversial, as many of these people were involved in, and sometimes even leaders of that hateful party. Former President Truman stood by his decision, saying that because of the relations with the Soviet Union, quote, this had to be done and was done. Several of the scientists a part of this program were later investigated because of their former ties, but one was only ever tried out of the over 1,600. None of the paperclip scientists were ever found guilty for any crimes either in the United States or in Germany. Perhaps the most famous of all of the paperclip scientists was Wernher von Braun, who played a huge role in advancing NASA's Apollo missions. Alright guys, that has been our list for today. Thanks so much for checking it out. I've been your host today, Olivia Kozlowski, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye!
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next! It's about mysterious small towns from around the world that are hiding some terrible dark secrets that will mess you up. Click the video now to find out more. You won't regret this decision.